After Gordon Dawe married Annie Middaugh in 1931, they went to live in the back third of the Dawe house on Green Lane. Gordon's parents, John and Maud Dawe, lived in the front of the house. Gordon ran the 17-acre fruit farm. Annie did the housework and helped with the farm work during the fruit season. On August 3, 1936, Annie gave birth to her first baby boy, Don. Gordon and Annie spent the next few years watching Don grow. On April 26, 1941, Annie gave birth to her second baby boy, Ken. That's me. Now Don had a little brother, and Mom and Dad had their hands full with two kids to raise. On July 29, 1943, Grandma Dawe died, and Grandpa Dawe hired a recent widow, Mrs. Morris, as a live-in housekeeper. Mom and Dad continued to nurture Don and me through our formative years. Mom recorded our growth by photographing us every spring in front of the rose bush in our backyard. In 1952, Grandpa Dawe had moved out of the Green Lane house to go live with his daughter Florence and her husband Harry Holm. Then in October 1958, Don married his girlfriend Gloria Hendershot, and they went to live at 276 Main Street East in Grimsby. Don got a full-time job working for Christie's Dairies in Beamsville and also in Grimsby with Jack Sweet, who was married to Mom's cousin, Amber. As for me, I started grade 13 in 1959. The following spring, I graduated from high school, and in the fall, I would leave home to start a 3-year course at McMaster University in Hamilton. That left Mom and Dad all alone in our big rambling house on Green Lane. After nearly 3 busy decades of married life, raising 2 boys and hosting family get-togethers, the place must have seemed awfully quiet and empty. Dad cultivated a pretty nice flower bed in the center of the driveway. But with Don and me now away from home, Mom's annual spring photos of the 2 of us in front of the rose bush in the backyard, well, they were sadly over. Although I boarded in a private home near the McMaster campus, I always took the bus back to Beamsville on weekends to visit with my mom and dad in our home on Green Lane and to catch the latest Hollywood movies playing at the Roxy Theater in Grimsby. May of 1960 was an eventful time for two of my cousins. On May 6th, my cousin Jim Middaugh and his wife Dora had their first child, Valerie. Jim and Cora Middaugh were now great-grandparents. And the following day, May 7th, my cousin Barbara and her husband Gordon Helmke had their first child, Gordy. Barbara's mother Dorothy, her sister Beverly, and Grandpa Dawe were very happy. But the big news in May for Lincoln County was the dismantling and moving of the 1815 log house built by pioneer Jacob Fry near Vineland. The fragile structure had to be hauled across the 20-mile creek and then lugged 4 miles further to the Jordan Historical Museum of the 20, where it was reassembled and restored. The grand opening was cause for jubilation, and my cousin Linda Middaugh joined several local ladies in wearing vintage apparel to celebrate the occasion. That fall, Linda started grade 11 at Beamsville District High School. Her extracurricular activities included cheerleading for the home teams. At the Beamsville Fall Fair, Dick Brown, our neighbor on Green Lane, was crowned 1960 Peach King of Lincoln County. He joined an illustrious group of peach growers on Green Lane who had previously won the trophy, including our neighbors Reg Sturt and Frank Mazzina, who actually won the trophy 2 years in a row. On September 24th, Mom's sister Violet and her husband Fred Walker celebrated their 25th anniversary. Among the family members at the festivities were Mom's brother Wilfred and Mom's cousin Frida, as well as Grandpa and Grandma Middaugh. It was an opportunity for the 4 sisters-in-law, Mom, Violet, Wilfred's wife Marion, and Ed's wife Doris, to have their picture taken together. The celebration was a modest affair because although Violet had a good sense of humor, she was the kind of person who didn't really enjoy being the center of attention. And on November 24th, Grandma Middaugh's sister Maud Southward died at the age of 79. 1961 did not have a very auspicious beginning for me. On a Friday in late February, I had a severe pain in my left chest. I dragged my suitcase onto the bus and took it home to Beamsville. I passed out at home, and our family doctor determined that I had a collapsed lung with internal hemorrhaging. Accompanied by our doctor, Dad and Mom drove me to Hotel Dieu Hospital in St. Catharines. From there, an ambulance rushed me to Toronto General Hospital, where I had lung surgery to remove the diseased part of my lung and cauterize the blood vessels. After a lengthy stay in the hospital, I was allowed home for several weeks of recuperation. The nest on Green Lane was a little less empty that spring and summer. Meanwhile, Dad and Dom were in the process of building a split-level home for Don and Gloria in our woodlot on Green Lane. By spring, Don and Gloria were able to move into their new home. They began a long love affair with dogs, starting with their first one, a poodle they called Daphne. Grandma Mitta was now 74 years old, and Grandpa Mitta was 79. They were living comfortably but modestly at their home on Ontario Street in Beamsville. Grandpa Mitta had retired as road superintendent for Clinton Township the year before, and he now spent most of his time back at his son Edwin's farm, training Ed's 2 horses, Countess Bird, seen here, and King Peter. Here he is warming up King Peter before the start of the races at Beamsville Fair. And here he is holding the reins of Countess Bird as she is draped with roses after winning the featured race at the Welland racetrack. Grandpa continued training horses well into his 80s and was awarded a special honor by the Beamsville and District Harness Horsemen's Association. On September 5, 1961, Grandma and Grandpa Mitta celebrated their 55th wedding anniversary. Grandpa Mitta's sister, Pearl, was there, as were Mum, Marion, and Doris, Linda, Gloria, Bob, and me. It was another opportunity for the 4 sisters-in-law, Violet, Mum, Doris, and Marion, to get their picture taken together. On January 15, 1962, Grandpa Dawe died at the Fairhaven Rest Home in Vineland. He was 92 years old. On March 11th, Grandma Mitta celebrated her 75th birthday. And on April 26th, I turned 21. Mom and Dad would often take Grandma and Grandpa on Sunday afternoon picnics. And Ed and Doris would take Grandma and Grandpa up to their cottage in Huntsville. That's Doris holding Susie, whom she had adopted the year before. While life was relatively quiet on the home front, tensions were rising in the world beyond Beamsville's borders. The space race between the United States and the Soviet Union took off when the Russians sent the first man, Yuri Gagarin, into outer space in April 1961. A month later, the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, raised the stakes by vowing to land an American on the moon and return him safely to Earth by the end of the decade. Hostilities between East and West were further exacerbated by the building of the Berlin Wall by Communist East Germany that completely cut off West Berlin from the rest of West Germany. The Communist Eastern Bloc claimed that the wall was erected to protect the socialist state of East Germany from the West's efforts to destroy it. But in fact, the wall was built to prevent the massive emigration of people fleeing to West Germany from the Eastern Bloc. But it was the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962 that brought the world the closest it ever came to nuclear war. When the United States discovered the presence of Soviet missiles in Cuba, President Kennedy ordered a naval blockade of Russian ships heading to Cuba. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev threatened military retaliation. It was a tense standoff. Finally, Khrushchev agreed to remove Soviet missiles from Cuba in exchange for the U.S. removing its missiles from Turkey.
Goodness gracious, great ball of fire!
And then there was the sad end of Marilyn Monroe, who on August 5th was found dead in the bedroom of her Los Angeles home. She was 36 years old. The coroner determined that she died from an overdose of sleeping pills, but conspiracy theories soon surfaced involving President Kennedy and his brother Robert Kennedy. Ex-husband Joe DiMaggio took care of all the funeral arrangements, although the couple had been divorced since 1954. Back in Canada, the big news was the opening of the Trans-Canada Highway on September 3rd. Now Canadians could drive coast to coast from St. John's, Newfoundland to Victoria, British Columbia on a single well-paved 8,000-kilometer-long national highway. In March 1963, my cousin Beverly Smith completed a training course for nursing assistants in Hamilton. And in May, I graduated from McMaster University with a Bachelor of Arts degree. Mom and Dad attended the graduation ceremonies, as did Don and Gloria. My friend David Stauck and his girlfriend Mary Ann Quick also graduated that year from a 4-year term at McMaster University. David was the oldest son of Henry and Winifred Stauck, who lived on Number 8 Highway, halfway between Beamsville and Vineland. David had been a year ahead of me at Beamsville District Secondary School. After graduating from high school in 1959, he enrolled at McMaster and received his honors Bachelor of Arts degree in English, as did Mary Ann. David had spent the previous summer hitchhiking around Europe. His postcards made me envious and ignited a desire to see more of the world. And so, in the fall of 1963, I moved to Toronto. I rented a room in this house on Lowther Avenue, a garret on the top floor just under the roof, and started a 2-year course in radio and television arts at Ryerson Polytechnical Institute. David Stauck and Mary Ann Quick also moved to Toronto and started graduate studies in English literature at the University of Toronto. David was living just a few blocks away from me in a 3rd-floor apartment on St. George Street, and I would often go over there for breakfast before heading down to Ryerson. And then, on Friday, November 22nd, it happened. John F. Kennedy, 35th President of the United States, was riding in his open convertible in a motorcade through Dealey Plaza in Dallas when he was assassinated. About an hour later, Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested and charged with firing the fatal shots from a sixth-floor window of the Texas School Book Depository building. Kennedy's body was placed in a casket and then loaded aboard Air Force One. Just before the plane departed for Washington, Lyndon Johnson took the presidential oath of office on board with Jacqueline Kennedy by his side. Oswald's case never came to trial because 2 days later, on Sunday morning, while being escorted from Dallas Police Headquarters to the Dallas County Jail, he was shot and killed by Dallas nightclub owner Jack Ruby. The entire horrific sequence of events was captured live on television. John F. Kennedy's state funeral took place the next day in Washington. Representatives from more than 90 countries joined the funeral procession. And we were left to ponder, was this just a meaningless blip in the West's progress toward a better society? Or was it a harbinger of things to come? In a widely anticipated and publicized event, the Beatles arrived in America in February and appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, thus spearheading the British invasion of pop music. The birth control pill, coupled with Betty Friedan's revolutionary book, The Feminine Mystique, started the women's liberation movement. And fashion designer Mary Quant introduced the miniskirt, scandalizing conservatives and signaling the rapidly changing mores of the decade. But few of these influences were felt in Beamsville. My cousin Linda had graduated from Beamsville High School and was now teaching home economics in the region's secondary schools. Over the years, Linda's father, Wilfred Dawe, had tried his hand at a number of jobs. Besides being the Lincoln District Fire Chief in Camden, he worked for a while at Cornelius Plumbing and Heating in Beamsville, and later at the Haynes and Farrow Winery in Jordan. Now he decided to serve as warden at the St. Catharines Jail, but that proved to be too stressful for him, so he soon quit and started work at the Moyer Debo plant in Jordan, where he operated a large sheet metal press. Wilfred's wife, Marion, was a 4-H club leader. Here she is taking a course at the Vineland Experimental Station on how to work with wool. On August 10th, a party was held at Don and Gloria's Woodlot home to celebrate Gloria's 25th birthday. Those attending included, from the left, Ed, Doris, Vi, Grandpa Mira, Helen Hendershot, Grandma Mira, George Lawrence, Bob, me, and Bill. Grandma and Helen had a good chat. This was Grandma Mira's last family outing. A month later, she was diagnosed with colon cancer and spent the remainder of the year in the palliative care ward at West Lincoln Memorial Hospital in Grimsby. On a happier note, David Stauch and Marianne Quick were married on August 22nd in Oshawa. David chose me as his best man. After their honeymoon trip out west, David and Marianne resided in a flat at 110 Broadway Avenue in Toronto. I got a room at 44 Dundonald Street, which was much closer to Ryerson than my previous rooming house. It was also in 1964 that I discovered the theater scene in Toronto and began going to plays. Some with big-name stars like Richard Benjamin and Myrna Loy in Barefoot in the Park. Live theater would become a lifelong passion. Grandma Mira passed away at West Lincoln Memorial Hospital on February 5, 1965, at the age of 77. Grandpa Mira continued living at their home on Ontario Street. It was up to Vi and Mum to do his housework and prepare his meals. That summer, Mum and Dad and Vi and Fred took Grandpa Mira on Sunday drives around the countryside. They went to Brantford to visit the Chapel of the Mohawks and Chiefswood, the home of Pauline Johnson. They drove to Elora and over the covered bridge at West Montrose. They visited Westfield Pioneer Village at Rockton. And the Pioneer Village at Doon. Mom and Dad also went on weekend trips that summer with Don and Gloria to such places as Black Creek Pioneer Village, Stephen Leacock's home in Aurelia, and the Muskoka Lakes, staying overnight in motels and cottages just like in the old days. In October, Mom and Dad drove down to New York State to visit Dad's cousin Gil Smith and his wife Florence in Wampsville. Mom and Dad didn't stay at Gil and Florence's house, but checked into a nearby motel. Gil and Florence took Mom and Dad on a drive along the Hudson River, where they visited the Vanderbilt Mansion at Hyde Park overlooking the river. They had a picnic on the grounds, and then they visited the Roosevelt Mansion, also at Hyde Park. As for me, I graduated in the Radio and Television Arts course at Ryerson Polytechnical Institute, along with 21 other classmates. One of them was John McKay, and he and I rented a flat in this house on Walmer Road, just a block away from Casaloma. John got a job at Chum FM, but I had trouble finding work that I really liked in the radio and television field, so I began working as a supply teacher for the Toronto District School Board. I soon got a reputation for being a pretty good teacher, not just a babysitter like so many other supply teachers. Before long, I was first choice for 8 high schools in downtown Toronto, and I was working every day of the school week. Making enough money to pay the rent, eat out at decent restaurants, go to lots of movies, and catch the latest touring shows at the Royal Alexandra Theatre and the O'Keefe Centre. Still, life was a bit unsettled, and not just for me, but for North America in general. In March 1965, about 600 civil rights marchers headed east out of Selma on U.S. Highway 80. They were confronted by a legion of state troopers who brutally attacked the marchers. Televised images of the attacks presented viewers with horrifying images of marchers left bloodied and severely injured, and roused support for the U.S. civil rights movement. Then there was Dr. Timothy Leary, whose book, Turn On, Tune In, and Drop Out, sanctified the widespread use of marijuana, LSD, and other recreational drugs, and helped create a hippie counterculture that challenged established social and moral standards. Canada was not immune. In Quebec, nationalism had been rising and was on the verge of violent explosion. The separatist FLQ was spreading fear by planting bombs in mailboxes in Montreal. Prime Minister Lester Pearson believed a new flag would help unite French and English Canada, and at the same time move Canada away from the old British imperialism heralded by Canada's red ensign flag. After lengthy debates over numerous designs, the current maple leaf flag was chosen and inaugurated in 1965. The new flag was quickly embraced by the public. Still, one viewed the remaining years of the decade with a great deal of uncertainty.